Welcome to Homegrown. It's good to see you and stick around. We've got lots of great information for you, the gardeners of Newfoundland and Labrador. On this week's show, we'll highlight the garden of Pat and Toby Rivers here in St. John's. As their kids grew up, the backyard was slowly converted from a playground and soccer pitch to a beautiful garden that has everything from annuals, perennials, fountains and vegetables. Their sloping front lawn was very difficult to maintain, so Pat and Toby removed the lawn and planted trees and shrubs. Now their front lawn looks a lot more interesting and requires a lot less maintenance. Debbie Preston is back. This week she'll talk about some of the diseases that are common for plants grown in pots and large containers. For many of these problems, the solution is simple, so just watch and see. I'll take a closer look at a plant that's often taken for granted when we go hiking. It's sphagnum moss, and it's so plentiful and abundant, but believe me, it's well worth stopping and having a closer look. So stay tuned, I'm sure you'll enjoy what we have for you this week. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and I'm right here in St. John's at the most wonderful residential garden of Pat and Toby Rivers. It just has everything here, and here's Pat. Let's have a little word. Hi, Pat.
Hello, Wilf. Welcome to the garden.
Thank you. This is beautiful.
Well, thank you.
It looks like a lot of work. How long have you been working on this?
Not a huge amount of time, about 10 to 15 years.
10 to 15?
Yes.
Yeah. And what was it before?
Oh, this was a soccer pitch, sandbox, climbing frame. Yes, it was well used.
I bet.
And abused. Yes.
And so you didn't just like do it all at once.
No, we developed it bit by bit.
Really? Yeah.
Yes, and the children used to say, "Mum, which bit of lawn are you digging up this year?" So we took it slowly.
Well, I think that's the secret, because you don't want to bite off more than you can chew, because then you end up resenting it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, it's just so colourful, and you've got all sorts of little bits and pieces. You've got a great little pond over here. Let's go see that.
Okay.
And you've got some wonderful Menianthes, that's a native plant there.
It is. It actually came out of a native pond.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. And then a water hyacinth I see, and that Plantago. Wow, it's just gorgeous. I like these stones with the herbs in between.
Yeah, these are all different species of thyme.
Wow.
Yes, which bloom at different times of the year. So there's always a little bit of colour here in front of the pond.
And then if you step on them, you get that little scent,
smell.
and
yes.
you can always use them in the salads.
That's right.
So this was a little bit of work as well.
We didn't think it was going to be a lot of work, because the pond book which we bought said that a pond could easily be put in a weekend.
A weekend?
Well, a month later, after renting a jackhammer, we finally had a hole big enough for the pond.
Well, this was not a book in Newfoundland or Labrador.
No, it was written for the South American market. I think.
That's great. It's great. We got irises, we got rushes. It's beautiful. And I love that yellow...
the Corydalis.
The Corydalis,
yes.
Over the back there.
That's a self-seeder, so it has just sprinkled itself around the back of the pond.
Well, it looks magic. It's wonderful. Do you keep fish in there?
We did have fish for several years, but this spring, when the ice melted, we had 5 of them floating belly up on top. So I don't know what happened this year, so we've left it for now.
Okay.
But we may restock it.
All right. And then from the pond, then we move over to a beautiful mass of perennials with colour now. There's obviously been colour in the past, and there's colour still to come.
That's right.
Which is really what you need in a perennial bed. You need some early, some middle, and some late colour. So let's wander over and have a look at some of these. You know, what I like about this perennial bed is it's full of colour, and you haven't manicured it completely. There's foxgloves popping up everywhere.
Yes, well, they have a mind of their own, so we just let them come up wherever they fall.
And I suppose you take a few out,
We
but
do.
leave some in.
We have to take some out, or we'd be choked.
You'd be
by
choked with them.
foxgloves.
Yeah, it's one of those naturalized plants, but it's easy to forgive at this time of year.
It is. They look so lovely.
They
don't
really do.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful here. We've got early plants like this is a candy tuft.
This is the creeping phlox.
The creeping phlox.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Creeping phlox. And so that looks like it's finished. But here we are a little higher. We've got the evening primrose.
That's right. Yes.
And then we still something to look forward
We've got bright pink phlox
Bright
here, which
pink.
comes out at the end of August.
And this is really important in any perennial bed of having low and medium and high plants and early, mid-season and late plants. And it really gives you interest right the way through. And what else we got here? We got irises, they've finished.
Yes, they were beautiful. We got the heuchera here for a bit of foliage
Yes,
colour.
look at the difference in foliage
Yes.
between this bright green and the bright yellow of the evening primrose and the heucheras. There's so many different heucheras available
Oh,
nowadays.
they're lovely, yes.
They are.
Yeah.
And little dianthus here. And you've got feverfew, that little chrysanthemum over there.
The feverfew is a bit like the foxgloves. It tends to put itself all over the garden, but a little bit here and there is very nice.
That's right. And,
yes.
and you can always forgive them. When they put on a nice show, you can forgive them.
That's right. And then
It's
you
beautiful.
can pull them up before they seed.
That's right, that's right. And you still got daylilies to look forward to
We
as
do,
well.
yes.
Yeah.
We've had some of the earlier ones, the Stella d'Oro, the yellows.
Right, yes.
And they're over, and now we've got the orange ones at the back.
That's great, that's great. So, perennials, but you also eat your garden too. I can see a
We
beautiful
eat some of
vegetable
it.
garden.
Yes, we eat some of it, indeed.
Let's
Yes.
go see the veggies.
Okay.
Now I said we were going to the vegetable garden, but I have to have a look at this plant. This is the sea holly, isn't it, Pat?
That's sea holly, yes. Alpine sea holly.
Alpine. This is Eryngium. I love this plant, and this is one of those plants that you don't see in many people's gardens. It doesn't look like much in the springtime, but it looks wonderful late in the summer. It's a great plant. I think everybody should grow this. But anyway, I digress. We were supposed to be going to the vegetable garden, so let's get over there. Wow, look at all this. I suppose the spinach, you've had a great meal of spinach.
Oh, the spinach we've
Yeah.
been eating for, I'd say 6 weeks, 7
6 weeks.
It's been great, but now it's gone to seed.
And that's the
Yeah.
thing with spinach. As soon as the day length hits about 14, 15 hours, it always bolts. But you can grow another bunch for the fall.
Yeah, I've just put in some Swiss chard actually up
Right.
this end, so we hope to be eating that at the end of the summer.
And leeks are looking wonderful.
Leeks do well, I must say. We love
Yeah.
leeks, yes.
And so when do you harvest these leeks?
Oh, not until probably about the first frost.
Yes.
So they take us through the soup season
Right.
in the fall.
I know Ross Travers digs them up under the snow.
Oh, well, no, I don't like coming out with my gardening tools in the winter.
No,
so
you put your tools away, you keep
Yes,
them away.
that's right.
And then nice bunch of radishes, and the lettuce looks super.
yeah, that's Freckles lettuce.
Freckles.
Yes.
It's got a great speckle on the leaf, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it's a bit of red and green.
Look at this one. That's nice. Nice looking lettuce. And that's staying nicely behaved. That's not bolting.
No, it hasn't. No, I'll have to start eating it.
Wow. This is a super garden, and look at the work you must put into this lawn.
No, absolutely no work at all on the lawn apart from mowing it.
Really?
Yep.
Well, it's got grass in it. Obviously, there's a lot of clover
A lot of clover, yes,
And,
and lots of weeds.
and lots of weeds. But
But
hey,
it's green, and we've never had chinch bug.
you've never
had
chinch
chinch bug.
That's
No.
great. Okay, so you've got to look after your soil. You can't have a beautiful lush garden like this without looking after the soil. So
I
what
think
do you
that's
do?
the answer.
Yeah?
You know, if anybody's starting a garden, is to pay attention to building up the soil.
Right.
Well, we do our own compost. We've got
Sure.
2 compost bins here at the back
Great.
of the garden.
Great.
We also get a bit of manure from local farmers.
Right.
Add some peat moss, lime.
And
Bob's your uncle.
about all.
Yeah.
Bob's your uncle. That's,
So-
that's what my dad used to say. That's wonderful. And then last but not least, it's obvious a place that you just enjoy being just sitting in. You've got
yes.
you've got a deck here. You've got some wonderful containers here, and you can just surround yourself with scent and beauty. Pat, you've done a wonderful job.
Well, thank you. Well, I give credit to my husband too, who does a lot of the heavy work.
He does the heavy
Yes.
work. Well, I think that's a great partnership.
Right.
Thank you so much for
You're
showing
very
us
welcome.
around. It's
Gardeners
been super.
love showing their garden, so.
Well, this is a great garden to show.
Thank you.
Thanks, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Now, Pat and Toby Rivers did have one big problem in their garden, and that's the slope that goes from a lawn way up there down to a driveway down here. And what used to be a grassy slope that was really difficult to keep well mowed, it was weedy, it dried out, it was a real problem. And so instead of dealing with a problem lawn, get rid of the lawn completely and put in a wonderful range of shrubs. And look at this, it's beautiful. We've got ground cover shrubs, we've got foliage shrubs, we've got a group of conifers and flowering plants, and together they make a wonderful, almost patchwork of foliage textures and colors. It really is a beautiful job. And what I'm going to show you is just a few plants that you can place together and really get rid of a lot of work. Once they're all mature, it's a really easy part of the garden to maintain. We've got juniper here. This is the native Juniperus communis, or the low juniper that you'll find on all sorts of hillsides around Newfoundland and Labrador. And then contrast that to this pink flowering shrub, which is a spirea, a beautiful spirea with almost chartreuse green, almost lemony yellow foliage. And then contrast this to a ground cover, which is a cotoneaster, and that will have little pink flowers and then red berries, and this is one of those wonderful plants that bees love to come pollinate. And again, we're talking contrast here. Here we've got a pine. It's probably a mugo pine, and again a totally different texture, and this will have cones in the fall, and a really nice looking plant as well. A real dark green plant here is a yew, and this time we've got an upright type of plant, and then right beside it a very low variegated euonymus. What a beautiful mass of plants this is. And then over here, I didn't even see this, we've got heather, Scots heather, and this is a white flowered variety. And I think just past this beautiful weeping cedar, we've even got some heath or erica. And really, well, right in front of this candy tuft. What is there to do here? Well, there's a little bit of shearing, either in the spring after some flowering or in the fall. You might want to nip some things back. The ground is covered, there's hardly any evaporation, so there's probably not a great deal of watering needed. There's probably not a great deal of fertilizer needed either. Just a little bit of shearing, a little bit of maintenance. What a wonderful display of foliage and texture and color on this slope that would have been a real problem in the past if it was just grass. So really, congratulations, Pat and Toby Rivers, a beautiful garden and a beautiful answer to a problematic slope. We'll be right back.
As we become more urbanized, container planting on patios and places like that is becoming more and more popular. Well, Debbie Preston's here to give us some advice on overcoming some of the problems with containerized plants.
This week we're going to look at several different disease problems that have developed on some potted plants. These are plants, ornamental plants that you might have around your garden. We can look at some examples of some of the disease organisms that have attacked the leaves. They all have the same beginning problem, and as we're looking at them, if you can figure out what the problem is, then you're well ahead of the game. This is a little maple seedling that's been grown in a pot. It's been grown in this pot many years. You can see the roots are really hanging out. The pot is starting to degrade, actually. It's been that long. And as you look at the leaves, we have what's called a physiological disorder called leaf scorch. And the brown edges on the leaves, on the margins, are starting to turn dry and crispy. It's spreading inward along the veins. The tissues are starting to break down. You can see that happening a lot, especially on the older leaves, and it's starting in the new leaves all along on the backs of the leaves. You can check and make sure that it's not an insect problem by turning over the leaf and seeing if there's any insects on it, and watching the plant throughout the season. Is it something that's developing quite quickly or something that has developed overnight all of a sudden? And is it starting at the top of the plant, moving its way down, or at the bottom, moving its way up, or is it all over all at once? If you look at this little lilac, again in the pot, it's got some leaf blight developing on the edges of the leaves. Again, that dry crispiness, the leaf scorch, some distortion of the leaf as it was coming out, as it was developing. Again, turning over the leaf and looking really closely at it, you can see some of that browning, really dry, crispy, cellular breakdown on the leaf. And it's happened all throughout, all over the plant. It's a little bit worse on one side than the other. You can see some new shoots developing. It's starting to flush out again without the damage. If you look at this little goat spirit, you can see a chlorosis in the leaf. The leaf has gone yellow. The veins are still nice and green, but all between the vein is very yellow, and the cells are starting to break down as well. We've also got some rust developing on the plant. This bright purple spots is a leaf rust. You'll see that on a lot of different plants. You get that bright purpley or reddish spot, leaf spot, and it's a rust disease that's developing. This is a little tiny seedling of goat spirit. Goat spirit likes to have it moist, a really rich, moist soil that's well drained. It likes a shady condition, somewhere that's a little bit dappled light, doesn't like the hot sun. Certainly doesn't like to sit in this black pot out in the sunlight and get burnt up, get that sun burn on the leaves and the chlorosis developing. This little guy's got some tip burn, tip dieback. You see the leaves are turned crispy and drying off. If you go down the stem, there's canker at the bottom of it. There's some galls developing along the twig, some large galls here, swellings along the branch. This is all going to die back eventually because the gall is going to girdle the branch, and all those leaves above it can't get the proper moisture. All these problems can be related to one condition, an environmental condition where the situation that they're in is not ideal for the growth of the plant. So the plant is stressed. They're not getting enough moisture, their roots are confined to a small area, and they're being neglected. They're not getting water twice a day, probably is what's needed in this heat. So lack of moisture is causing all these different problems to develop. So what is the tool to control this diseases, all these different diseases in our garden? It's not a chemical, it's not a powder, it's not a spray, it's our trusty old watering can. And we have to get out and water these plants twice a day while they're in the pots, while they're suffering under these situations. Ideally, we're going to plant them in our garden. We're going to find some nice, deep, rich, moist soil, get them planted in, get them watered for the first season, and get them established. Little plants like this that like the shady, moist conditions, we're going to plant under the tree. These guys, we're going to prune them back and plant them out here in the sun a little bit more and give them the root zone and the space that they need. And we're going to give them the environment, and then we won't have to worry about the disease problems next year. Thank you, and I hope you've learned something about some of the different diseases that you might find in your garden.
Thanks, Debbie, for some great advice. Obviously, gardening in containers presents a whole bunch of new problems. Well, on with the hiking boots. Let's go out into some of the wetlands, and we're going to find a really interesting plant.
I'm right here in a peat bog, and the plant that actually makes up peat is a plant called sphagnum, and it's a moss, and it's a really important part of our ecology because sphagnum actually builds land, if you like. It acts like a sponge, and it raises the water table of a body of water, and then other plants can then root into the sphagnum. Now, we use sphagnum peat in our potting soils. We use it a lot in all our gardening needs, but in its own place, in a bog, it's a really important plant. And if I pull sphagnum up, now it's just broken off, but see how long and tall that plant is. And it can be really long, and it grows up and brings the water table with it, and it acts like a sponge. And if I grab that and squeeze it, I'm just going to look at all that water coming out. That's what sphagnum does. It acts like a sponge. So it holds on to water, so it will have water for plants to root into, but it also has a lot of air in there, so it acts like a potting soil right here in a bog for plants to root into. Now, its water holding capacity is really useful in potting soils, but it's also been used in many other ways. During the war, especially some of the early wars, sphagnum, because of the rain and because of the acidity of this area, sphagnum is such a sterile substance that it was used to actually clean up wounds during wars, and actually it was used as a dressing and then bandaged onto wounds. It was used as early sanitary napkins, and it's also been used more recently in napkins or diapers. So it's a very important plant. It's a land building plant. It's a plant that we use in all our gardening. Anytime you buy a plant in some potting soil, you know there's peat moss in there, and it's been used in all other applications as well. So next time you're in a bog, have a look at the sphagnum and the peat moss, and give it some respect, because it's really useful.
Well, there you have it, show 2 of the new Homegrown series. Next week we're on the road to central Newfoundland to visit the Wooddale Provincial Tree Nursery. This amazing facility grows over 15 million trees per year. Well, how's it all done? Tune in next week and we'll talk to Conservation Officer Joanne Windsor. Joanne will take us from the orchard to the greenhouse and beyond. Debbie Preston's subject is powdery mildew. It's a common garden malady which can be avoided even before the plant is planted. I'll have another of the province's native plants. Next week I'll highlight the alder. Much maligned, the alder is one of the most valuable species in our forests. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next week.